Before we do that, I do have a slide I want to look at. Okay. All right. So let's start a slideshow. So installing the IP phones. There's keep in mind what we do have a WAN port and a LAN port on the system. So it allows some flexibility, a lot of options on how you install the phones, and how you can connect it to the network. Okay, so this slide here shows the customer has an internet. They've got a broadband connection. They've already got an existing firewall. They've got their data network. They've got a LAN. All the devices are connected to a switch. You can connect the QX WAN, W-A-N, WAN port to that switch. It would get an IP from that DHCP server. On that same network, you've got the PCs, and you can also connect the IP phones, and they will configure through that WAN port. All right, you have to tell the system where those phones are located, whether they're on the LAN or the WAN. This time they're connected physically on the WAN side. All right, there's a setting for that we'll show you. But the system, if you have SIP trunks, it can get out through that firewall. You may need to configure that firewall, but it would be able to get outside to the internet and be able to receive traffic using SIP trunks. Maybe you've got FXO ports, but the phones, placement of the phones in this case is actually on the LAN port, or WAN port, sorry. The second scenario is very similar. The customer still has the same broadband connection, firewall, PCs, they've got a data network. The QX WAN port is connected to that network, so it can get outside access. The phones are physically connected on the LAN, L-A-N. It has maybe a separate switch, and that's probably the easiest configuration because the phones will get an IP address from the QX, and it works real well that way. A similar configuration to this would be, instead of connecting the WAN port to their data network, the WAN port could have its own public IP, its own broadband connection, which isn't unusual at all. So in that case, you've got the phones, the IP traffic, the voice over IP traffic is completely segregated from their data network. All right, so that's and we do have a couple other methods. You can also use VLAN to configure the phones. You can put the phones on a VLAN. We can act as the DHCP server within that VLAN on either the WAN or either the WAN or the LAN. So there's a lot of options on that. But let's take a look at that. Just keep that in mind as we go forward here. So we look at interfaces on the left. We click on IP lines. All right, first thing we want to look at is the tab here called IP line settings. So before you do anything, you want to make sure that you've got an option here to enable plug and play. We can also enable firmware version control, where we will control the firmware for either for the phone. That is available on Yealink, Snome, and the Mitel/Astra phones, the automatic firmware version control. Okay, and then down here at the bottom, you'll see the option. It says configure the phones from either the LAN or the WAN. So you have to tell the system, and that's important because we're going to provide a configuration file out to the phones, and the IP address that we're going to set in that configuration file will be the system, either the LAN IP or the WAN IP based on this setting. So you need to tell the system where the phones are physically located. by changing that setting from either LAN or WAN, or vice versa, the system, and as soon as you save it, it will prompt you and ask you if you want to do a reboot. It's like one of the only settings in the system that requires a reboot. All right, so you want to set that early. All right, then we'll look at our IP lines. All right, there's 3 methods of configuring your phones to the system. One is the easiest, is just simple plug and play. You connect the phone to the system, and if it's one of the phones that supports the plug and play option, then we automatically configure the phone. It comes up with the very first IP line that's available, as long as that extension, as long as that IP line has an extension available to it. In my case, if I were to connect the phone plug and play, it would not configure. Okay, the reason being is, sure, I've got a lot of available IP lines. You can see like IP line 11, 12, 13, those are all available, but there's no extension assigned to it. So when we go to configure that phone, it wouldn't know which extension to assign. Okay, ordinarily it would grab the first available IP line that's not used, but it has to have an extension assigned to it. Okay, so for me, right now, the way this is setting, I would not be able to do a plug and play. Okay, I would need to use the second method, which we refer to as auto config. Okay, with auto config, you choose the IP line, which also has the extension on it. Remember, you assign the IP line back at the extensions level. Okay, so here I just choose the IP line, and I change it. I activate the phone, IP phone, and now I choose the phone model. So in here you're going to see a very long list of available phones that we're going to configure. Okay, a lot of these Cisco's, there's the Fanvilles and Grandstream and all their phones, and H-Tech, and long list of phones. A lot of these phones are old, but they're still connected to some of these systems, and maybe the customer still has them. That's actually a plus with using our system. You can still configure like the SoundPoint IP300. Some of these are I think that's an older phone. But we'll still configure all these. Definitely the Snome 190, 200, 220 series. All right. So you'll just choose your phone model. You'll enter the MAC address. You're going to change the line appearance. Okay, let's say if this changes to a Ulink 46. By default, our line appearance is set to 2. If you're taking notes, you definitely want to change this to something higher than 2. 2 is kind of like what we use across the board, all phones. But this is going to limit the number of simultaneous phone calls to that phone. So if you have a phone, some phones only support 2 calls, and that's kind of like the minimum across the board. But in most cases, the phone will support quite a number of calls, and if you want to have a call on hold and you receive a second call and you go to transfer it, well, that right there is 3 calls. Okay, so you want to change this line appearance to something higher than our default of 2. Then you got the username and password. Okay, so this is the registration username and password. This is what allows the phone to register to the system to validate and authorize itself to the system. Okay, we assign it automatically a username, for example, LOC, local extension 107, and we will assign a password to it. All right, it's again, you don't need to know what that password is. In most cases, you don't even care what that password is. The reason being is we're going to create a configuration file. It's going to be pushed out to the phone, and as part of that configuration file, it will have that username and password in it. Okay, by default, they're going to have good, strong, secure passwords. You don't have to worry about it. If I wanted to enter my own password, let's say I wanted to use something like 1234, it'll tell me number one, that's very weak, and it doesn't meet the password security minimum requirements. Okay, so as you begin adding 1, 2, 3, 4, add some special characters, some letters, and then the password gets stronger as you go. And eventually you get a very strong password. It's easier if you're just trying to create a password. You can let the system use the password generator, and you can see the complexity of the passwords that we use. Obviously, these are just random generated, and they will never be guessed. So you can choose one of these. All right, just click on it, and actually just click on it, and that's the password that will be set. And then you save your settings, and then that's it. That's the second method of configuring the phones. We refer to that as auto config. All right, there is a third method. It's called manual config. Okay, so and this is for those devices that are not on our supported phone list. We're not going to configure, but they support SIP, so they should still basically work. Okay, so you've got soft phones, you've got video cameras, you've got door stations, you've got a lot of SIP endpoints out there these days that you can configure and they can register to our system. So for those devices, you're going to go in here, choose the phone model type. You're going to list it as the very bottom, and it says at the very bottom of the list, it says other. As soon as I do that, this MAC address gets grayed out. I can't change it. In this case, I will need to manually configure that device. So in this case, I need to know what that username is, local extension 109, and I need to know what this password is. So I can still choose a good strong password, and if I'm careful, I can highlight it, right-click on it, I can copy it, and now I can choose it and select it, and that's the password that will be used. So now I need to go off to the device, configure the username, the password that I just set, point it to the IP address of the system, and using port 5060, and at that point it should register. Okay. So you got three methods of configuring your devices. Once the phone is configured, you'll see some keys over here on the right hand side. There's a reboot option, so I can reboot the phone. I can click web, which will connect me to the user interface of that phone. And you'll see here there's also an MPK, multifunctional programmable keys, MPK. All right, by clicking on that, it takes me to a page where I can configure the individual keys. So this is a Yealink SIP T27P phone, 21 keys on it. And I can choose the individual keys. Typically, pre-configured is basically whatever's on that default, what's been defined on that key. You're going to leave it as is. Okay, you're not going to change it away from what's already on that key on the phone. And that's we can call that pre-configured. Typically, you'll leave the keys 1, 2, 3 as is. Those will be the keys that the user is going to use. The end user will use to originate and receive calls to. All right, that will be their personal extension. And then you get to like keys 4, 5, and 6. You got a drop down here. You get some codes or some features. Most of these are already available on the phone. You're not going to need many of these. There's a speed dial key. that you can configure. There's a call recording, so you can toggle the call recording, turn it on, turn it off at different points in a call. If this was an agent, they can log in, log out for ACD. And then you've got your watched extensions. So this is also referred to as BLF. BLF keys, so you can see the status of some other extensions in the office. With those watched extensions configured, you can press a key, for example, extension 100. Whenever they're on a phone, that key would be lit, and then I can also, if I want to place a call to that user, all I got to do is press that key, and it would also originate and place the call over to them. There's some additional keys. As you begin adding new extensions, the list is going to grow. New features, for example, there was a call part key 155, which we looked at earlier. There's also a so you can assign those keys, call part extensions. You can create a shared voicemail box, in this case extension 120. So maybe that's a virtual extension. All incoming calls go to extension 120, ring several phones, they don't answer it. It gets the call goes into the general voicemail box or shared voicemail box of extension 120. I can have a key on my phone that's going to be lit every time one of those somebody leaves a voicemail. So we go to lunch, come back, everybody comes back from the office about the same time, and if there were some messages that were left, anybody that has that general voicemail box key, they'll be able to see that the key's lit. They press the key, they listen to the message, and then it's then the key, it won't be lit anymore for all those phones. There's also a scheduling key, so I can create a schedule, and I can see when that schedule is active for call routing purposes. Maybe incoming calls during the day, they're going to ring extensions. After hours, it's going to after hours number or auto tenant, and they'll be able to see when that after hours is lit, and they can manually toggle it and change the schedule. So you got all these keys that you can define. So keep in mind, once you start defining these keys, they're only done here on the system. It's not until that phone reboots and gets a new configuration file from the system that that those settings are pushed out to the phone itself. All right, let's look at the IP phone templates. Okay, and so you can create a template, as I have here, custom template. You can have several templates. Once you create it, you can click on it, and on this template, it's going to have all the different manufacturers on the left, and I could go to any one of these, and I can make changes so that I can create a default template, so that whenever I configure a particular phone model, there's going to be certain keys that will be configured each time. So that way I don't have to create those every time on every phone. All right, you'll see all the models listed, but you also see the general settings. Okay, and in the general settings, you get certain configuration parameters settings that have been taken directly out of the phone configuration file, and we've either modified those settings, and we give you the opportunity to change them back. Here on this page, we tell you which settings have been modified and what they're set to. Or maybe there's some other settings that we haven't modified. We give you the option to be able to change those, because there's certain behaviors, certain things, on the, that you may want to change. For example, this is the number display style, taken word for word out of the SNOME configuration file. There's a drop down, and this is the format for the caller ID. So when you receive a call, by default, it's only going to show the name. So if you're using SNOME, You're going to want to create a template, and you're going to want to change this so it shows the name followed by the number, or the number followed by the name, one or the other. If you leave it at the default, it will only show the name for caller ID purposes. There's other settings in here. We've optimized some of these settings for the best results, but you can change these. There's a dial plan here, so when you pick up the phone and you dial, say for example, *0, it'll automatically make a SIP call. So you can use this template to your advantage. Let's say the user picks up the phone, they dial 10 digits, they don't want to press the send button or the check mark in the case of SNM phones. You can configure a template so that it knows and understands that when you dial 10 digits, it knows it has enough digits, it can go ahead and originate that call. By default, it's going to wait about 4 seconds. All right, so just keep that in mind. You've got these templates, these settings that can be changed for all the different phone models. Once you create the template, you're going to need to go in here and set in the IP line settings. You're going to need to set that template to be the default for the office. And you notice when I click on my IP lines that it's using the custom template that I created. If you had more than one template, you can go in here, click on the IP line, and where it says use template, it's just going to use the default, which is the custom template, which has been assigned as the default. Or I can use any of the, if I created 5 different templates, I can use one of those for a particular phone model, for example. All right, I think we've covered the IP phones pretty good. I don't think you'll have any problems with that. Most people are able to configure the phones. If you do have any problems, just check the firmware against our latest. Make sure you have our latest release to start with. That's actually very important. Start with our latest firmware, and then check the phone model and see which firmware that it has available to you. You just have to be careful on the Fanville phones. Don't downgrade some of those. They sometimes those phones get stuck when they go through a downgrade. All right, let's take a look back at the extensions management table. And I want to go through some of the user settings. All right, and I can get to the user settings by simply, you see this little icon here with this little person. I could just click on it, and it will take me to the user settings. This is the same page that was shown at the beginning when I logged in with the from the main page using my extension 100 and password. It logged me in to the user settings. All right, so in the user settings, you've got if there were any voicemails, they would all be listed here on this page. It allows the user to delete the voicemails. You can even listen to them over here on the right. You can click play. You can download it and listen to those voicemails. It tells me how much free space is available. Let's look at the voicemail settings. Go to the General Settings tab. Maximum voicemail duration, that's how long of a voicemail you're going to allow somebody to leave on your phone. In this case, 5 minutes. It's a pretty long voicemail. You can limit that to something less, 2, maybe 3 minutes. Forward and rewind duration, set for 3 seconds. The time isn't as important. You can probably leave it at the default of 3 seconds. Probably don't need to change it, but the option itself is it's pretty nice, and a lot of people don't realize that it's there. So when you're listening to a voicemail and you get to that part of the voicemail where they leave their callback number, oftentimes people they're not very clear on that callback number. They say it too fast. You can't write down the digits. So what do you have to do? Oftentimes you have to listen to the entire message again. We've all done it. You might have to listen to it 2, 3, 4 times, and if it's a long voicemail, you get frustrated because each time you're only catching a few digits. All right, so instead of listening to the entire voicemail, all you have to do is press the digit 4. It will rewind by 3 seconds. So you can listen to that part of the message again. All right, so if you press it 3 times, it'll go back 9 seconds, and you press the digit 6, it will fast forward. So you can you can jot down all the digits, keep pressing digit 4 as many times as you need to until you catch all the digits. Real nice option. All right, so you've got some options here for the user's personal settings. You just leave them as is. Most of the people don't need to change those. Once they've changed or uploaded their greeting message, it can be downloaded. Voicemail notification. This is where you set the voicemail to email. You put in their personal email address, whatever it might be. So provided that you've already configured the email settings, you can go in here and enter their personal email address. So whenever they receive a voicemail, it will be sent and forwarded to their email inbox. Once it's been sent, you can also delete it, which is the checkbox that you see here. Okay, we can also receive faxes to each extension. So the incoming call, if it's a fax machine, we recognize that it's a fax machine. We can hear the tones coming in. Then in which case we'll switch, and we're only going to be listening for those tones at the beginning while we're playing the voicemail, the extension greeting message. Okay, once it begins to record, at that point we're no longer listening for the fax machine. So just keep that in mind. If you're doing a fax, make sure the voicemail greeting is long enough that we have an opportunity to hear those tones coming in. All right, so we'll switch to fax reception, and it can be sent to your email as either a TIFF or a PDF document, and then it can be removed from the extension after it's been sent. We can send you a text message. If you configured your SMS settings, you can send a text message out to the cell phone. We can originate a phone call to you, so it rings your extension or phone, and you can listen to the voicemail at that point. Voicemail indicator, by default, it's going to be a lamp indicator on your phone, but you could also have a special dial tone or special ringing cadence, or all three. Voicemail redirection. Okay, so when a call comes in, you've got the option, it's called zero out redirect. So you can have a message on your greeting. It says, if the call's urgent, please press 0, and you'll be redirected to wherever it might be. By default, you press 0, and it's going to go back to the auto tenant. Now, you'll see the call type here, and we need to discuss this briefly. But you've got the call type of PBX, which will be used to redirect the call to some extension in the system. You can place a SIP call, place a call out on one of your FXO ports using PSTN. The option that I want everybody to get in the habit of using, is just the auto option. And in here you will enter the exact digits that the user would use as if they were dialing from their handset. Auto basically passes those digits to the call routing table. The call routing table will find the best method to reach that phone number, whether it's be first choice to go out on a SIP trunk, second choice to go out on an FXO. It will decide how to place the call. But the important thing is, if you use auto, it'll give you the same it's going to be enter the digits exactly the same as the user would dial from their handset, and it'll take advantage of the call routing table to place that call. So if we do detect a fax, we can also send that call off to the extension. Maybe it's a fax machine. All right, we can enable automatic fax receiving mode so that it's always expecting a fax to come in. Out of office. So you can set your out of office greeting, which is real nice. So you're going to be away from the office for the next week. You're on a vacation. We change our voicemail greeting messages, and then we re-record it once we get back. Well, there's another option for that. It's called out of office. So you can record from your handset. Just record. You just go to *0 to access your voicemail. Option 3 to change your greetings, and then option 6 to change the out of office message. You record a new out of office message. Hey, it's Andy. I'm out of the office for the next week. Check with you when I get back. So you record your out of office message, and then you need to enable it here within the GUI, the interface, and you set the expiration time so that it will continue to play that out of office message until you return. And then once this expires, then it goes back to playing your regular greeting message. All right, so it's nice, so you don't have to keep recording that the general greeting message, which oftentimes you work at it 2-3 different times, re-record it. All right, call history just shows extensions or your calls that you've made, some general PBX information, speed calling. You can create, each extension can have a 100 number speed call list from 00 to 99, and you can update that list from your phone by dialing *76. It's a feature code, or you can update the list right here from within the GUI interface. So if somebody's using that speed call list, you probably want to give them access so that they can create the list easily here. It's easier than doing it from the handset. So you can see here I've got, for example, speed call code number 22. I dial, it's going to be dialing 972-692-1166, and I place that call by simply dialing #22, and it will go ahead and place that call. Account settings, the main thing that you're going to see in here is you can password protect your extension from for incoming and outgoing calls. So whenever you go to originate a call or receive a call, before you place that call, it will prompt you to enter your voicemail password. So if you're going to be away from the office and you're the only phone in the office that's allowed to make international phone calls, well, it's not a bad idea to put your phone under password control. Basic settings, okay. Here in the general settings, you see the no answer timeout. The default is 20 seconds, so that's about 3 rings approximately, at which time the call would go to voicemail. So the timeout is 20 seconds. If you're doing some certain features like Find Me, Follow Me, you may want to increase that time to about 40 seconds. 20 seconds is usually not enough. Okay, call waiting, of course, it's enabled by default. Hold music, it's going to use the system-wide music on hold, but you do have the option of creating individual music on hold for individual extensions. Do not disturb settings, you activate do not disturb, it'll be active for 30 minutes by default. And do not disturb is dialing *72 from your extension, and it activates the extension do not disturb as opposed to the local do not disturb on the phone itself. Okay. You can create an alarm. This goes hand in hand with our hotel options. but you can create an alarm for this extension, and it will ring you at a certain time, and it will play a message or our default recording. Dial and announce. So you could place a call to an extension and put it on a schedule, and it could do so on a regular basis. And so that's the dial and announce option. So you could call to a specific extension, certain time and date, and it could be on a repetitive schedule. Hotline is not. It's only available. The hotline settings. Let's see, is going to be available on the analog phones. Okay, so this is hotline would be pick up the phone and it would automatically place a call to some extension in the office or some outside number or whatever it might be. For example, like a lobby phone or something. You pick up the handset, it places a call. It's only available on the analog phones because when you go off hook on an IP phone, you're getting dial tone from the phone itself. The system has no idea that you went off hook and got dial tone because it doesn't know about the call that you're trying to originate until you dial the digits and press send. So hotline's only available on those analog phones.